So I think it's time to start. Yes, everyone ready? Thank you for sitting at the front. So ladies and gentlemen, carbon crusaders, climate warriors, future net zero heroes, welcome to our panel on scaling high integrity carbon markets. Today we are setting our sight on the big question: how do we take carbon markets from fledgling frameworks to global game changers? We have an incredible lineup of experts who are not just talking the talk, but walking the very green walk towards low carbon future. I would like to present them to you. First, we have Simon Flemeyer, who is probably the closest thing the carbon markets have to a James Bond type of secret agent. He works for the Swiss federal government of environment, and he basically negotiates the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement and climate advisor for the government. In his spare time, if you can call it that, he also coordinates the Environmental Integrity Group and serves at the Zurich Board Carbon Market Association. Next, we have Sebastian Cross, Chief Innovation Officer and the founder of B0 Carbon. Before getting into the deep end of carbon markets, he cut his teeth at the Bank of America and then Bank of England, and now he's using all this expertise to make the B0 Carbon to a powerhouse for innovation. Moving on, we have Amy, the CEO of Integrity Council for Voluntary Carbon Market. She looks super young, but she has 2 decades of experience in legal and regulatory framework of carbon markets. She helped to structure the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement and has been a key player in setting the rules to make sure carbon credits are credible. And finally, there's me, carbon finance lead at I4C. I4C is the private sector arm of the World Bank. We work with the private sector companies in developing countries to help the people in developing countries. So whether you are here for the policy insight, for the tech, for the integrity, how the markets can tango between compliance and voluntary market, I hope it will be an interesting and enlightening panel discussions. I'm going to start with Sebastian. Sebastian, we were at an event yesterday, and Sebastian told me that I can ask any question that I would like. So I'm going to start with a funny question and a more serious one, because my manager, he is here in the audience, so I cannot ask funny questions. I got to be serious at sometimes. So we will start with a funny question and a more serious question. So Sebastian, what is the strangest thing on your bucket list?
The strangest thing, I moved out to the countryside a few years ago, and I bought a field attached to my house, and it's not really being used at the moment. And I'm naive enough to think that I can just hire a digger and build a wild swimming pond. We'll see how that goes if I ever find enough time to do that. But yeah, I'll report back with that. That's as strange as it goes in my boring life.
So thank you so much. So there is a fine line in carbon markets between Sherlock Holmes' level of transparency and the Wild West shootout of vague claims and hazy promises. So how are you using the data and innovation to ensure that the carbon market is more Sherlock Holmes than Wild West? Like, do you leverage technology and data to improve transparency and trust in carbon markets?
Absolutely, and thank you for having me, and thank you for the icebreaker question first. It's great to be here with such a fantastic panel. So the Sherlock Holmes analogy is a fantastic one. I'm a big Sherlock Holmes fan. Unfortunately, I'm not going to claim to be the Sherlock Holmes of the carbon market, because ratings are kind of a tool that people use, and indeed a tool where we'd like to create more Sherlock Holmeses in the market. If you will, I'm Sherlock Holmes's magnifying glass. So what does that mean in practice? Well, if you look at what the rating's telling you, we know that there's lots of carbon projects out there. We know that they all have risk. every single project has risk. Doesn't matter how you define it. They all have ongoing risks, and people need a tool to understand that in order to be able to manage that risk, in order to be able to feature it in how they make their decisions. And the rating is the tool to do that. It's the tool that allows you to understand the likelihood that a credit is achieving a ton of carbon. And that rating encompasses a huge range of different data sources, of different technological innovations. If you look just on the geospatial side, the number of different data sources that we use to feed into not only the initial rating of a project, but its ongoing monitoring, ensuring that the rating remains live and reflects what's happening on the ground. We have a partnership with a company called Planet. They provide us with different sources of data that they get from their own satellites. And we not only feed that into our own rating, but we're able to reflect that on our platform so that people can use that data through our platform. And that is 3 meter by 3 meter pixels globally on a quarterly basis. So anyone can go onto our platform and literally see the world. It's quite cool if you're planning, if anyone's into their road trips, if you're planning a holiday, it's an amazing way to see the world. So different use cases for a platform. But ratings are bringing this innovation to the market, and like I say, are being used in a way that enables people to make informed decisions and to manage their risk. And it means that you don't have to bring all of these innovations that are happening on the supply side of the market in-house. You can see that reflected through the rating, and the rating can be the product that you use in order to make it easier and indeed cheaper to access this market.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Like, you are the Sherlock Holmes magnifying glass. Thank you. So now, Amy, my funny question for you first. You cannot escape. What is kind of the weirdest food that you have ever tried in your life?
Thanks for the question, and it's really nice to see everyone and check everyone's awake, I guess, as well. I am mainly vegetarian, and I used to live in France, in Limoges, where there's a festival of eating innards, and I think it would be the eyeball soup.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So your work in ICVCM is like super valuable for the carbon market, obviously. For those who don't spend the weekends reading up on carbon markets, and can you break down the concrete steps that ICVCM is taking to improve the integrity in the carbon markets?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And I won't do a show of hands as to who knows which acronyms apply to which organization. The Integrity Council is an independent governance body for the independent carbon markets, the voluntary space. And through a large stakeholder process in 2022, where 5,000 consultation responses came into a draft rule base, set up the 10 core carbon principles and an assessment framework that the existing carbon market voluntary carbon market is being assessed against. And so we have a 2-tick process where we assess carbon crediting standards, independent carbon crediting programs, and we have 5 eligible programs that have passed that assessment process and others that are in assessment at the moment, and they've applied to the Integrity Council. And then that's the first tick, so the independent carbon standards become CCP eligible if they pass our CCPs, and I'll come to this in a second. And then the second tick is a review of the existing methodologies in the carbon market that are used for projects to issue credits against. They are all being reviewed in a multi-stakeholder working process where ICVCM experts and stakeholder experts are all reviewing those methodologies against the ICVCM rules. To determine whether, if there's a tick on that, you can then label credits issued under those methodologies by those eligible programs as CCP labeled credits. And what you get then is a comparability in the market between previously non-comparable programs and non-comparable methodologies. So to try to create collective understanding of what a good methodology and a well-governed program in the voluntary carbon space looks like. We have 10 core carbon principles, and they are robust governance around the governance of the organization that issues the credits, runs the crediting program. Tracking, which is around the way that registries work, a transparency, which is around making sure that everything that needs to be publicly available around all those projects and all those rule bases is publicly available. Third-party verification, which is using best practice rules around validation being by third parties, verification being by a different third party, all the things we've learned in the carbon markets. And then we have, and those are all operating at the program level. And then we have four core carbon principles that look at the way that methodologies work: additionality, robust quantification, avoiding double counting, and permanence. I think these are probably familiar terms to people who understand how carbon projects are designed. And two real lifts for the voluntary carbon market in our last two core carbon principles: transition to net zero, so the contribution of the project to the country's journey towards net zero, and sustainable development and social safeguards, which includes human rights, a free prior informed consent, managing environmental and social risks, and reporting on them and mitigating them, and where possible, quantifying them. So it's a comprehensive framework that injects a threshold for quality into the market, from which the foundation for new and scaled development of the market can then build.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So we have looked at the tech side and integrity side. Now we are going to look at the policy side. But before the policy, we have the cheeky question. So what is the guilty pleasure TV show, Simon, that you are kind of watching?
I have to disclose, I get a prep for this question. So I was asked before. I thought
like 2 minutes before, though.
2 minutes before, it's enough. So first, stupidly, I thought I take sex education. I don't know how many of you have watched it. It sounds so weird, but it's actually really great and I think really interesting. But I decided to then change and swap over to Narcos.
Narcos, okay.
Which, of course, many people have here, I'm sure, have heard of. And I choose it because I think sometimes it feels like it's a similarly messy market as the carbon markets.
Oh, that was a bit...
But think about it. Maybe not entirely, but you know.
Okay. So I'm going to move from Narcos to chocolates and precision that the Switzerland is known for. Basically, what kind of specific tools and policies that Switzerland is developing to cut through the noise and build high-integrity carbon markets?
Yeah, thanks. So now we're getting serious. So I'm not sure we have crazy tools and policies, but I think maybe some people have come across Switzerland in the carbon space, in the 6.2 space, and we have tried to do some work. We have signed a few bilateral agreements with a few countries. We have started that work long ago. It has, it's tough work, takes a lot of time, and so on. But we're making progress, and we've also had some first authorizations of activities under Article 6.2, and even a first international transfer of ITMOs. And I think what is special about it, or why did we get to where we are at now, is just because we have spent a lot of time. So I think one of the things that is absolutely key to working under 6.2 is really spending a lot of time and understanding your partner countries. And it's not by accident that sometimes the negotiation of a bilateral agreement took 4 years. So I think that's the one thing. And then I'm also, I can't guarantee that we're cutting through the noise and that we're, doing everything right. But I think on the Sherlock Holmes analogy from before, I think what we are trying, that may be part of the reason why we are still a bit slow, or could be faster, is that we're really looking very seriously at all the activities that we're authorizing, trying to get external views on it, have by now quite a big project team that's looking at all the, just all the activities, and I think so far we are content with the outcomes of that. But of course, and that's the key question of this workshop today, is like how do you scale it, and how do you balance this Sherlock Holmes kind of trying to want to know everything and not make mistakes with moving bigger.
Thank you. That is the key, definitely. So Sebastian, come back to you. I hear you are the guy with the secret ingredient in the magic carbon credit recipe. So with so many claims about carbon credit quality, what is kind of the magic formula that separates the wheat from the chaff? What do you see as the most promising solution to address the challenges of carbon credit quality and verification?
So, as anyone who's been involved in carbon markets for any time at all will know, the term high quality is used quite often. And the problem with the use of the word quality is it's subjective. I can tell you something is quality according to my own opinion. You can have a different opinion. What the rating tells you about is risk. And the two are often conflated. And so those people who are selling high quality projects are not selling risk-free projects, but the two are often seen as the same. And that's obviously not the case. As I said in my previous answer, every single project has risks, and people need the tools to be able to understand and manage those risks. And so when it comes to managing risks, we've seen huge amounts of innovation across the market. And in fact, what's been going on the demand side of the market has really masked huge innovations on the supply side of the market. Because if you look at how the market looks today versus even 5 years ago, it's dramatically different. From our perspective, we've gone from, we introduced the rating to the market only 2.5 years ago. At the time, there was no correlation between our rating and pricing in the market. Fast forward to today, and you see a positive correlation between the rating and pricing. So developers and other players in the market now have an economic incentive to develop and manage better projects. Fantastic. You're also seeing it being reflected in retirement data. We've seen a shift in retirement data whereby at the start of 2022, the average rated retirement, 70% of them were below BBB. That's now flipped around, so that 70% of them are BBB or higher. And so the rating is starting to kind of permeate across the market. But it's also not just in the traded market, but in how projects are being developed today. Our rating is starting to be plugged into contracts so that if people are being offered offtake agreements, a very good way for a project to raise finance early on is to be able to secure an offtake agreement that they can then take to a bank or a financial institution and say, look, can I use this to get access to more capital? The off-taker wants to be able to manage that risk, particularly given that it's not just a one-off transaction. This stretches out into the future. They can use the rating. We're seeing the rating being written into those contracts that says, if your project is rated X today, that's fantastic, but we want to ensure that rating is maintained over the lifetime of the project. And so we have the right to walk away if the project drops below a certain rating. So now the off-taker is able to manage their risk. The supplier has the incentive to manage the risk. And it's exactly how ratings are used in other markets. To the point on the innovations that we're seeing, in terms of the tools that leverage the kind of ratings and the language of risk that they bring, obviously insurance is a big one. We've seen a number of insurance companies start to offer different types of products across the market. For many of them, the rating is a plug-in to how they're modeling risk to look at the premiums that they're asking for. And we will very soon see rated portfolios in this market. I think that's the next big innovation that we're focused on. If you want to be able to manage risk, typically people look to diversify risk. They don't just look to invest in individual assets in other markets and in this case, individual projects. Building diversified portfolios is a way for end buyers to be able to manage risk. And it's something that we're starting to see in this market, but I think that it will increasingly be used. So that use case of a rating across the market and the ability of people to manage risk, I think, is increasingly bringing capital into the market that wasn't able to access it beforehand, but means that the whole demand side, the debate going on there, actually, if you look at the market as it looks today, as I said, it looks very different to 5 years ago, and that's not necessarily being reflected in some of the demand side conversations that are going on, and unfortunately.
Thank you. Thank you. We talk about these Article 6 market and voluntary markets, Amy. Do you think they can kind of dance together, or should they be dancing in separate circles? Can they, can the Article 6 markets or voluntary carbon markets tango with Article 6 markets, or they are, as I said, they should be dancing in separate markets. How do you see this interaction between two markets?
Thanks, yeah. So Article 6 is under the Paris Agreement, and it has a mechanism that operates and issues credits centrally, and it has what's called 6.2, where it's bilateral relationships between parties, as Simon was explaining, and we've got some representatives of some negotiating countries that are doing a lot of work, Kazu-san, and others over in that corner who you might want to talk to as well, about on those Article 6 markets. And one of the things that we increasingly hear discussion about is what is the interface between that reporting and accounting regime under Article 6.2 guidance that shows that countries are tracking the way that their interaction in international carbon markets is accounted for under their nationally determined contribution, their commitments under the Paris Agreement. How does that connect to the 6.4 mechanism that also issues credits that then can be used in that system? And the independent carbon crediting space, where historically the demand side has been corporates looking to manage their emissions in their business operations, and you know those discussions around Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 emissions that you might be familiar with. And one of the really important evolutions of the last few years is, you know, at the same time, and you know, my background is from the UN, and I led the negotiation support to Article 6. And at the same time that we were finalizing that rulebook for Article 6, the ICVCM was being set up to scale voluntary carbon markets. And both of these are responding to that need to move historic carbon markets up into a high quality, low risk space for scaling climate carbon finance. And so they can and they do complement each other. If you take a look at the core carbon principles in the ICVCM and the assessment framework that underpins it, you will see in it rules that are also, you know, you can find those rules that echo in Article 6 rules in different negotiation language, because the market has a good understanding of what the next level of good should look like. And just as in our Article 6.4, there is a transition process from the clean development mechanism now through 6.4, and you know the CDM will give way. We can have a political discussion about how that will happen, but you know, will give way to 6.4. In the same way, the ICVCM is helping insert what the new forward-looking good looks like into the voluntary market, and these should be mutually realigning over time. And we talk with our experts and with our board members about a virtuous cycle between the two. And that also means that even if a credit is created in 6.4 under that system, it could end up being used by a corporate. If a credit is created in an independent project developer operating under an independent carbon crediting program like the VCS, like Gold Standard, like ACR, you can expect that credit could end up being used in a carbon tax compliance regime when the government has set the framework around that. So, there were historically quite distinct international markets, domestic compliance markets like the EU ETS, and voluntary markets, and now international markets under Article 6 and independent markets, voluntary carbon markets. It's really about where does the credit start, where does the credit end, and if it stays outside a government regime, maybe it's still a voluntary carbon market. If the credit moves between one of those sources and demand centers, we see the convergence, and that's what's happening. So, for example, right now, I think there's work being done by some carbon crediting standards with countries on exactly how that works. And you can, some of those countries and actors, those programs are here. So I think they do work together. And I think one of the things we need to recognize is as you develop a sophisticated market and scale it up for the purpose of carbon finance, these things just need articulation and conversation and understanding so that everybody's aware that you can create mutually reinforcing low risk, high integrity markets that can deliver that finance in the way that's right for the country, and the country to incentivize in the framework of what it will expose to its NDC and what it won't expose to private actors under its NDC delivery.
Thank you. Yeah. When we talk about the Article 6, maybe it's a good way towards you. So you have kind of a secret Swiss knife in the Article 6.2 market, the Click Foundation. Can you explain a bit how the Swiss government work with the Click Foundation and its role and how you guys collaborate together?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity for clarifying this, because I think it's like one of the most common confusions out there. Someone thinks, oh, you're Click, so you're Switzerland. And I'm like, no, I'm not Click. So it's maybe not super exciting for everyone, but really just this is all based on a law in Switzerland in which the CO2 Act, in which the government has different instruments for different sectors. And for the transport sector, there's a compensation obligation for the actors that actually bring the fuel that is used in the cars into Switzerland. So these are the fossil motor fuel importers. And they have this obligation. They decided to group together as the Click Foundation. And so basically, the government that I represent is regulating the Click Foundation, but at the same time also working very much hand in hand with the Click Foundation. So, we have kind of a distribution of tasks. I mentioned these bilateral agreements before. That's obviously something that the government has to do. So, all the accounting parts to it, the degree to which it can be counted towards the Swiss target, and in the end, the Swiss, under the Swiss law, but then also towards the Swiss NDC, that's obviously all a government role. But then the procurement of the activity, of the projects, is entirely in the camp of that foundation, because they have this legal obligation. So that's a journey to Swiss domestic political economy. But yeah, that's how this works. And so if you have further questions, there is a booth of the Swiss, the Click Foundation around at the marketplace as well. And they can explain this further.
Thank you. I heard they have nice chocolates as well.
And I hear they have nice chocolates, which you should check out.
Good. So finally, maybe we go back to the private sector. Everyone is talking about how the private sector funding is essential for scaling the carbon markets. But do you think the voluntary carbon corporate participation really cracked the code to scale these markets? And how do you see the digital platforms or AI or your product stepping up to make the private sector engagement more transparent and more effective?
Yeah, so if I split the question into two parts on is voluntary demand sufficient to scale up the markets as we hope? No, it's unlikely to be. But to Amy's point, there's a convergence of markets here, and indeed, when we talk to investors, many of them are trying to draw this rather complex Venn diagram to see which market scheme they might be able to pay into, depending on how they develop. But at the end of the day, everything that we're talking about here is project-based carbon. Right? We are trying to finance interventions that either reduce or remove carbon, and so certainly from a rating perspective, we see it in exactly the same way when we're assessing the underlying activity. But that nuance really matters, and so the ability, particularly of governments, to send stronger demand signals, really important for investors today, but also important for any government that wants to use these markets in the future, because they're not just going to suddenly be there when you want to access them. Right, the time it takes between financing a project and it actually issuing credits is meaningful, and they face risks along the way. And so without a credible demand signal, many of them are not able to raise the finance they need on an ongoing basis and from the different sources that allows these projects to get started. So there's a very virtuous cycle that needs to kick in here. But for us, we're doing lots of work in that part of the market. As I said, many people who previously weren't able to invest capital in this market because they didn't understand it or they couldn't show that they were managing the risk, are able to use the rating to get it signed off by risk committees and and other checks and balances. So there is a lot happening. In terms of then the kind of transparency side of the market, so there's a big split, I guess, between the pre-issuance part of the market when it's all private anyway. This is obviously prior to a project issuing credits, but that issuance really matters because that's when it becomes public. That's when it becomes actually traded and people can use that credit. And so the availability of information really, really matters for the credibility of this market. People are using these credits to make claims. People need to be able to validate those claims. And so the publicly available information is crucial to continuing to build the credibility of this market. And unfortunately, it is an area where the market has struggled historically and continues to struggle today. We have a whole team of data analysts trying to take PDDs as they're presented today in PDF format, whereby each one looks different and each one's labeled slightly differently and is effectively in a different language, and converting that into a common carbon accounting template that we use that enables us to put any two projects side by side and understand them in the same language, structured in the same way. The fact that we have to do this exercise means that anyone who is engaging meaningfully in this market has to do this exercise, and that is a barrier to entry, and it's one that we need to get rid of if this market's going to scale. So, really working on the kind of digitization of carbon accounting and the reporting, the projects do as they go along, the issuance cycle, I think is a crucial area for the market to focus on. Because then, to the other part of your question on AI and how we can be using that and other digital platforms, the fact that you can't, anyone who tells you that they're using machine learning on some of this project data, I'm sorry, but we've tried it, right? It's rubbish in, rubbish out. Unless you clean the data, it's not it's not useful. So your ability to apply these models to this market relies on clean, structured data that just isn't there at a project level, maybe at an aggregate level, but at a project level. And so if we can unlock this, then we can unlock some of that broader analysis. It makes other services in this market a lot cheaper. And indeed, it means that when people come to criticize this market, it doesn't leave everyone scrabbling around trying to translate a PDD and everything that's going on in order to be able to defend it. There's ours and other tools available to do so, but we don't want people to just be reliant on us. We want people to be able to fact check this information for themselves, and at the moment it's very hard to do so in this market.
Thank you so much. So Simon, as I named you James Bond of this of this market because you just work for the Swiss government, but so you were in the thick of these negotiations for Article 6, basically. So, and there are at the moment still questions on the operationalization of especially the Article 6.4. So could you share the kind of key priorities for of the Swiss government to operationalize Article 6.4 side, because we know Article 6.2 is more or less operationalized now, but the 6.4, do you have any priorities?
Yeah, I mean, and I think I don't just want to offer the Swiss reflections on it, but so one thing, I was not at the COP last year, and I don't know how many people here really follow this Article 6 stuff. Can get quite nerdy quite quickly and like very hard to follow from outside. And when you're in it, you sometimes think, hey, what we're doing, like no one cares about this, right? And then there was the COP in Dubai, and there was no agreement. And then you had a wave of, associations and then news articles, everyone saying, wow, this is terrible for the market. And so I think, it's really, I wouldn't even distinguish, is now 6.4 or 6.2 more advanced? I think it really extends, and it goes to Amy's point of from before, like this is a big market with subsections, like some VCM and then, subparts of Article 6. But I think when there's a continuous signal at a climate conference that countries are unable to agree on what these rules are, this makes many actors doubt what's going on and like how legitimate it is, maybe for an entity like ICVCM or someone else or a corporate to engage in these markets. And so I think this is really the top priority. I think to send that reassurance that this was anchored in the Paris Agreement, because countries wanted this and see a use in it under certain conditions when it's done well. And this is what I think we have to show. And kind of the most disastrous thing that could happen at the next COP is if, again, just like in Dubai, one concludes at the end, okay, well, seems we can't agree. Seems we don't know what Paris-aligned carbon markets look like. And these are actually, the things that you alluded to, like the operationalization of the 6.4 mechanism. Like this is not, not some small last detail. It's not like everything is set and, you just send a bunch of nerds into a corner to like keep discussing. Like the things that are coming out of this 6.4 mechanism is, I think, really like the CCPs. Like it's comparable, like this is the meat. This is the meat of when is a methodology, when is a removal, when is a reduction considered high quality, or maybe not high quality, but just low uncertainty risk. Like when is there credibility for this market? And this is what we're negotiating. So it's these two recommendations that come out of the 6.4 supervisory body that have to pass through the climate conference because it was mandated in this way. But then equally under 6.2, there's still a range of things that also focus on the quality, the question, well, if I do 6.2 activities like Switzerland, and someone asks a lot of good critical questions and says, can you explain how this is in compliance with the guidance that was adopted in Glasgow and in Sharm el Sheikh? And it turns out we can't. Like there must be something for the credibility of the market as a whole to say, oh, this has to be kind of signaled. And this is exactly the same whether you're voluntary project, Article 6 projects, doesn't matter. Like I think we know of the scrutiny that markets in general have gotten in these past months and years, Guardian articles, and so on and so forth. And I think we need, and I think this is what Amy and the team at ICVCM is trying to do, this is also what the negotiators are trying to do, in order to send this positive signal to say, look, we thought about this for a long time, and this is how we think you do things right. And there will always be other actors like rating agencies and so on all around it, but this is really like an ecosystem task to show where are we taking this and where are we taking it in a way where in the end, the experts, but also a person just reading The Guardian or any other newspaper can conclude, hey, I think they're doing legit stuff in this market. And I think we're not there, right? We're trying to get there. We've done a lot of problem analysis, but I think this is what we want to get out of Baku, a positive signal that you can do this well if you try hard.
Yeah, hopefully. Now I think it's a good passage to Amy's last question, basically. So Amy, if you could grab your crystal ball, we are eager to we are eager for a glimpse into the future. What do you see as kind of the most significant opportunities or challenges in the next 5 years? So if you look 5 years from now, will these markets be poised for a takeoff or stuck in turbulence? Like, what do you see in your next 5 years?
Okay, thanks. It's a great question. In about 5 years' time, we're at 2030, and we're well into this cycle of countries looking at their NDC and aligning their commitments towards the need to get down to a 1.5 aligned net zero by 2050, right? The goal of the Paris Agreement. So go big picture, right? Bring this all together. The whole purpose of carbon markets is to deliver carbon finance to help countries finance resilient development and to reduce emissions and remove emissions, right? So that's the big picture. Countries on a journey according to their abilities and their economies down to net zero, right? And transferring know-how and finance and action, right? And so in the next 5 years, it really gets to the point where if we have to have unlocked the incentive for private carbon finance to flow from actors who are taking responsibility for their corporate emissions right through to communities who are taking action in their own communities to build resilient development models and sustainable development models and access climate finance. And we have a huge opportunity because what we see now is on every side of the market, everybody has started looking in the same direction, right? We have seen the Article 6 negotiations adopt their rules in Glasgow, and now we're in implementation phase. IPMOs are starting to move. It's tough, but they will get there. Everybody watch them hard, and they'll work harder, right? And then we, on the ICVCM side, we have created a huge tent of stakeholders. The whole market is invited. It is a collective endeavor of all stakeholders, whether you like carbon markets or not. You should be in our tent with us to build what the future looks like. And we have a huge series of really targeted, vision-based work programs where we're working on what does a really long-term vision for permanence in the nature-based market look like? How do we take insurance to support those issues? Another example, how do we make sure that jurisdictional crediting responds to the country concerns around how you set baselines? If you go to our website, you will see that all of these opportunities to share collective knowledge gives us a place to build a vision for the markets. And in 5 years' time, we will have a really centralized set of places where you can understand what a really good carbon market looks like. And we will have created, to your point, Seb, about how long it takes to develop a project, we will have created a clear message to developers how to get to that space. And I see some friendly faces of real-world implementers out in the audience who know how hard it is to balance all the different challenges and still deliver a transaction that has economic interest in. And what